Hello. This workshop is, as you can see on the slide here, about loneliness. Is it a state of being or a temporary feeling? I hope that what we talk about today can be helpful. You're welcome to ask questions. She did talk about some of my experience here. Um, I've done a lot of different things over the 36 years in mental health field. I would say I'm an expert. I say I have experience. And then you, of course, have your own experience with life experience that you can join with that. And hopefully, some of what we share today, like I said, will be helpful. So let's look at, in this workshop, we will discuss what is loneliness? What is it? What are some common causes? And just a second here, I'm going to try to move these. There we go. Sorry about that. I had to move those over so I could see what I'm doing. What are some common causes? How common is it? And how to manage or decrease it? Let's see here. So the first concept I want to kind of definition is alone versus lonely. Alone refers to a physical state of being by oneself. Lonely is the emotional state of feeling sad, isolated, and disconnected from others, even if you're not physically alone. You can be alone without feeling lonely. You can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely, on the other hand, if you lack meaningful connection. And sometimes that can happen in our lives. We'll talk more about it. Who has never at any time in our life been lonely? I was going to play this, but it's probably not going to work out. But we've probably all heard the song, "Oh, look at all the lonely people." And that, but is there hope? There's another song for lonely people. You may have heard it too. This is for all the lonely people. Don't give up hope. We're going to talk about some options, whether it's you or someone you know in your or different times in your life you felt lonely. And maybe you can share some ideas at some point too of things that have helped, whatever you feel comfortable with. But let's talk about it. So, first, common causes of loneliness. Harvard recently did a study about loneliness in America from about not quite a year ago, and they identified several contributing factors to loneliness. Some of them make sense, some of them you might not have thought about. Technology overuse, overworking, and what they mean by that is working so much and so hard that you're either too busy or too tired to engage. Um, or the changing nature of work, it being some remote, some hybrid. We're only a few years out of a pandemic. Um, Other key factors are mental health challenges which impact relationships with others, living in a society that may be too individualistic, no religious or spiritual life. Now, people can, of course, have whatever their beliefs they want, but they have identified in this study that that is a factor that people have cited as, or they found in their study of what one of the causes of loneliness. And too much focus on one's own feeling. What do we mean by that? Shouldn't we care about our own feelings? Of course we should. But like if that's our entire focus where we're not able to focus on anything else, just ruminate and dwell on how we're feeling, it's important to acknowledge feelings, but dwelling can, as we'll talk about, can really cause things actually to feel worse. They also Other studies have noticed that financial strain is strongly linked to loneliness, not just in the US, but globally. Financial strain really is a factor. Um, so, how common is loneliness? 2025 World Health Organization Commission found that 1 in 6 people worldwide are affected by loneliness, particularly prevalent among adolescents, young adults, and those in lower income countries. However, the good news is that the overall emotional health worldwide has rebounded some in 2023. Another measure by Gallup said that 1 in 5 people, so 1 in 6 or 1 in 5, that recently, yesterday, they felt some loneliness. So loneliness, pretty pervasive, and it does happen to many people. Okay, so it affects all ages, but apparently most common among young adults and teenagers. Gallup study found that in other countries, older adults tend to be more likely to report loneliness. And of course, different regions, countries, it depends on how much. Um, Interestingly enough, the American Psychiatric Association, uh, year almost 2 years ago, but not quite 2 years ago, found that 30% of U.S. adults experience loneliness at least weekly in the past year. And some people, it's 10% loneliness. And finally, 20% experience loneliness more than before. Okay, so I'm not going to go into detail about these most vulnerable demographics. I don't want to bore you, but just highlighting that, as it may not surprise you, some younger adults, men actually feel a lot of loneliness. LGBTQ individuals might be experiencing more vulnerable to loneliness, and low-income individuals. Okay. There could be more than one consequence of loneliness, but I wanted to highlight a couple. Loneliness is associated because, again, the mind body, um, they're all are interrelated. Loneliness is associated with increased mortality risk and a higher likelihood of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, depression, anxiety, and it can impact educational and economic outcomes. But interestingly, in May 2023, the U.S. Surgeon General, sorry, I got to go back there, um, declared loneliness and isolation a public health epidemic. And he said the mortality risk of lacking social connection is comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Wow. So now that we're impacting that and realizing that, oh man, it's an important issue then, basically. And that's why I thought I'd discuss it today. So now we get to how to manage or decrease it. Before I get to some of the strategies we have, is there anybody, sorry about this line that's here. We'll just have to ignore that or edit that out. I'm not sure how to do that, but I don't do that. But anybody have any thoughts before I move on that just immediately comes to your mind of some ways that to manage or decrease loneliness? And if anybody has put some in, Heather will let me know. But there's lots of evidence-based strategies to combat loneliness because what we want to address are the psychological, social, and environmental factors that all contribute to loneliness. Isolation, the things we've come out of, health, various reasons all affect it. So what we want to do is encourage those who feel lonely to try one or more methods that we'll discuss here, or those which may have, if you think back, which may have worked in the past, rather than dwelling on feeling lonely. Now, I mentioned that before, and I want to be very clear that we don't mean suppressing your thoughts. We'll talk a little bit about that. But the reason that dwelling and dwelling, like spiraling and dwelling and spending a lot of time on dwelling, on feeling lonely, is because dwelling on our thoughts or feelings of loneliness tends to lead to actually feeling worse. Now, acknowledging it, even being sad about it, acknowledging our feelings, that is important. It's healthy to acknowledge our feelings so that we know we then can see what we can do about it. That's different than just dwelling and dwelling and dwelling and making it worse. Okay, does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. All right. So in this survey, at least 3/4 of the people surveyed identified some solutions that they had to loneliness. Reaching out to family or friends. And of course, we're fully aware some family situations, the friends we don't have a lot of friends, or it's fractured, or we're lonely, or maybe there's social anxiety. But this was one of the methods. Searching through any family and friends we can reach out to. Learning to love myself, they said. Now that's a process, but it's important to learn how to accept and love ourselves. And there's a process. There are supports for that, but that is one of the things they listed. And learning to be more forgiving of others. Does that mean it's okay to do something, that something was grievous, that we should just be okay with it? No, forgiveness is a process of learning to accept what can't be changed for our own peace of mind. And the last one they put there is finding ways to help others. Okay, so just, my personal experience, as well as much evidence shows the effectiveness of individually, one by yourself, or in a collective group, acts of service or volunteering really, really can be helpful to well-being, mental health, and also combating loneliness. It says collective service can provide important connections. We're wired for connection, and that can relieve loneliness as well as cultivate meaning and purpose. So let's say you can, you're not sure, what do I do? I don't know what activities. I know what's in the community, or I can't get to some of them. Researching some community activities, community involvement, even if it's one time or short term, to see if any are possible. Another resource I like to highlight that can be really helpful is justserve.org. They, in most communities, either counties or states, you can go to justserve.org, enter your zip code, and it will tell you all the one-time or ongoing, all different kinds of volunteer activities. So if someone doesn't want to be committed for long, there's different things. There's lots of them, because it feels so good to get out there and do some of those things and connect with people. And it provides so many things. But so you can just, if you ever want, you can just go to justserve.org and look around. Okay. Again, if there's any questions or whatever, you can put in, Heather will give me a heads up if you have any. Another thing we want to talk about that can alleviate loneliness. Consider mindful digital and social media use. Now, who doesn't scroll sometimes? Of course. But they have correlated the years of social media. There's some good things about it. We're not saying there's not good things. But hours and hours of years and years, it can lead to isolation, lead to mind. What it can do is also skew our view of all the hard things going on in the world. Like, when I think back to what's the difference between a century ago and really difficult things and difficult things in the world going on now. Since time began, there's always been ups and downs, good and bad that have happened, terrible things, good things. And I will not deny it's a hard time right now. And one could debate whether it's a harder time now than it was in the past. I mean, if you look a little over 100 years ago, we had a pandemic and a world war. And about 5 years ago, we had a pandemic. So there's lots of, we won't debate that there are definitely hard things going on. But the difference is, 100 years ago or even before then, we knew about some of them, but we didn't know about all of them, hundreds of years. So nowadays, we're inundated with all these terrible things, with a skewing toward negative, and we don't look at the corresponding, many times, all the wonderful things and people that help and good things that are happening. So the view gets skewed of how the world is. I'm not saying ignore bad things, but it really gives us a skewed negative view. And that can affect how we feel. The good old social media thing of comparing ourselves to others. We tend to compare our perceived worst to what someone presents as their perceived best on social media. So all of these things can affect us. Also, FOMO, fear of missing out. Oh, I'm not doing that. They're doing all these wonderful things. I'm missing out. All of these can contribute to loneliness. And it's very likely with most things. And we're not saying exercise every day, 100 times a day, but if we're not getting any movement, or let's say we're in a situation where we can't do much movement, or our sleep is erratic, maybe we're worrying too much at night, or we have physical reasons we're not sleeping well, those can affect loneliness because it affects our emotional and physical, capacity. Some people don't like pets, but pets are a way to, so all of these things, now I'm going to switch it to what can help alleviate loneliness. I was talking about what can affect our loneliness. Now, this can help us overcome loneliness. Our mindful use of social media, looking for the good, looking for what's positive in it, things that uplift us, help us feel good, that are true and helpful in social media or any of digital use. Okay. Then seeing if there's anything, even stretching, anything we do for that, getting outside, anything. Seeing if there's ways, talk to our doctor, different patterns for improving our sleep. Some people want to get a pet that really helps for some people, alleviate loneliness. Developing hobbies. Let's say there's things we want to try for a long time, but we've never really done it. Looking into different hobbies can alleviate some of our loneliness. Studies show activities like this can help you boost your mood, improve your cognitive function, and your overall well-being. Okay, that's a lot of
Tammy,
talking I've done.
we had a
But what I want to
question.
do now too is there anything you want to share,
Yep, so we
Heather?
have a question. So
Go for it.
someone said, is it normal to still feel alone even when you're surrounded by friends and family?
Yes. And well, I should say it's not uncommon. Sometimes we can be surrounded by people and we love them and with them, but we don't feel a part of them. We don't feel connected somehow. Or let's say it's a situation where they're talking to them, they're not talking to us. So some of it is our perception of, oh, I'm disconnected from them. And some of it's actual reality. People aren't really connecting with us or spending time with us. Even some people in marriage, they can feel lonely. It can happen. It's a part of it is a situation where we're not feeling, but it basically comes down to we don't feel connected with those people. And sometimes it's something they're doing, sometimes it's our perception of how things are. We get a lot of, sometimes we'll make assumptions or whatever. Or, I love my brother, I just can't connect him, or we don't communicate very well, or they're all having a good time here in this room and I'm not feeling a good time. Does anybody really understand me? Does anybody feel like me? So, yes, to answer your question, there's times when we can absolutely feel lonely, even when we're not alone. Um,
And then we had someone kind of elaborate on that separately, and they said, is it normal to constantly feel lonely? Like there's never a break, they just always are feeling like that.
it happens to a lot of people, but it's not a normal state of being that we want to be in. Okay, nobody's bad for feeling that way, but it's definitely a feeling that we don't want to be in. Instead of a temporary feeling, it can feel like this is my state of being. This is how I feel all the time. Um, in that case, and that could be for grieving. There could be lots of reasons why someone's feeling that way. Maybe they felt isolated a long time. There's lots of reasons. We'll get to a slide further on about discussing if it feels that bad or even frequently, or not daily, but even frequently. There's definitely supports we can talk about that can help examine what's the cause and how to overcome that when it's a deeper issue. So we'll get back to that. I'm glad for these questions. Holding that toward the end, okay? And we'll come up with some ideas, okay? Thank you for asking, because that's definitely a painful place to be. All right. So first we're going to talk about mindset shift. It would be great if once we were aware of something, we could just automatically change it. Like, hey, oh yeah, now that I know that that's what's going on, I'm just going to not feel lonely anymore. That would be great if it was just like that. It doesn't work like that. But acknowledging it is first important. Then there's like, okay, well, what can I do about it? Everybody's situation is different, but let's explore a mindset shift. Identifying a personal goal or a sense of mission. Like, where did I lose that? When was the last time I felt a passion or a goal or something where I feel like my purpose or goal? If we've never felt that or we haven't felt it for a while, and what we've lately been doing is just ruminating on how bad we feel, a mindset shift would be so important. Sometimes we can, just by thinking about it for a few days, oh, I can do this goal. I can do that. Oh, I remember I always wanted to try this or learn this, or remind ourselves of our value and our purpose in life, like shifting perspective. Sometimes we can do that on our own. again, if it gets to where that's just really hard to do, toward the end of these slides, we'll get to what to do when it gets that bad. But sometimes just identifying a personal goal or something we can focus on other than our ruminating thoughts of loneliness and feelings. Another thing we can do is identifying what is in our power to change. There's a lot of things that happen in life which are out of our control, for which we feel helpless, things that we don't get to control. And that can feel overwhelming. So I do recommend stepping back, identifying and saying, okay, what do I know is true? What is in my power? Maybe not this moment, but I can start on in steps. What can I do? What steps can I take? What action I can take? Acting rather than being acted upon. Just shifting focus a little bit to what is in my power. Because by doing those little steps or big steps, things that are in our power, that can combat some feeling of helplessness, which sometimes causes us to feel lonely. Okay, optimism. Again, this is one of those that some people seem to come naturally with optimism. Some people, I don't get that. I can't figure out how to be that way. In fact, I get irritated when people are that way. Let's say someone feels that way. But optimism is actually a way of thinking that we can cultivate. And I'm not talking about fake, and it takes time, but identifying things that we thought would go bad, but they didn't, or hard things we went through that we actually got through, times when people did reach out to us, things that we can do to help others, times we think, well, it's been bad before, but it also got better. So it may not come natural, but it is something that can be developed over time. And reminding ourselves that for most situations, a state of loneliness is only temporary. It only tends, for many situations, it only lasts if we let it last. Now, obviously, there's things out of our control, but things that we can do, like we've been talking about, and we'll continue to talk about, of how we can change that pattern. Okay. Not necessarily easy, but can be done. So let's say you don't want to be an optimist, you'd rather be a realist. Pessimist is definitely going to add to our feeling of, you know, lack of optimism. It's not going to help us feel better over time. So let's say we don't want to be an optimist, but at least more realistic. For example, our mind tends to go to the negative because that's a safety thing. It's going to notice the things are negative. But if that's all we see, we're missing a big part of when things do go right, when things do go good, to be more realistic. So cultivating that mindset is a really helpful pattern to our mental well-being and feeling that we're not the alone part of being alone. Okay. So even if we just start by cultivating an attitude of gratitude, does that mean we don't acknowledge the hard and really bad things in our life? No. That we don't have our feelings. Of course we have our feelings. But when something, like I said, when something bad that we thought would happen didn't happen, or we got through it, or because when we think about all the what ifs, let's say you worry about a lot of what ifs. How many of our what ifs actually come true? Some do, we're not going to lie, but so many of them actually don't. Um, I'll give an example just to be fair to you guys. I was a little stressed for a few minutes about how this was going to turn out. And I said, Tammy, don't worry about it. Don't think about yourself. Focus on the things you know that can be helpful to others. And even if there's glitches like this little lovely line here that's going through that Heather may line through the PowerPoint that she may edit out, I don't know. But is it the end of the world? No, it's not a big deal. It's human. Okay. So cultivating the attitude of gratitude is also known to help loneliness because then we don't feel so isolated. Like, oh, my neighbor said hi to me. Oh, someone left me a plate of cookies. Oh, I still haven't had someone talk to me much, but more than it was before. Or I actually reached out. I feel good about myself about reaching out to someone, and now I'm going to go do this thing, volunteer to someone. So it takes time. It's not an easy thing to starting little by little. Even one thing a day. What is one thing that went well? One thing I'm glad about. It's not fake when we're being realistic about, oh, I'm glad that the water was running today. Sometimes things we don't think about. Okay. I know that's a lot of talking. Let's go to the next screen.
Hey Tammy, we had a question
Go
come in.
ahead. Go ahead.
Maybe a couple of them. The first one, somebody wrote in and said that they're feeling lonely because their spouse doesn't allow them to, and they put in quotations, act like a victim to their closest friends and family. So she or he is not able to express their feelings on a situation freely with their friends and family. And so because the spouse isn't okay with it, so they're feeling lonely from that and just wanting to know some advice on it.
Oh, that's a hard one. When someone thinks you're being, or even you think your own self is being whiny because you need to express your feelings. Okay. And that's difficult when it's in the same household. I like to look at it on a spectrum of, let's say over here is constantly complaining. Someone may have developed a habit of, and they may not even realize it, of constantly complaining over here. And over here is never allowing anything. Nope, I'm not going to even notice anything even bad, right? More realistic is, wow, this is really hard. Sometimes I do need to write it out. Sometimes write it down. Sometimes I do need to cry. Sometimes do need to vent to someone. So it may be hard to stand up to saying, yes, whining is not okay. But, and you can blame it us therapists if you want, but it is okay to express our feelings and talk to at least one person. That's not being a victim. A victim is never doing anything to do our part to change our circumstances, right? But when we're in something, it's okay to express it and then go to there's a two, and then look to what we can do about it. So maybe giving some, when it's in a calm situation, give some feedback to that spouse that, you know what, I understand about whining, but there's a difference and it's okay for me to have feelings. That's not necessarily easy, but yeah. Did that sort, any other questions before we move on to that one?
Yep, and then we have one more. They said, oops, sorry guys, my phone's loud. They said individual therapy causes me to ruminate on my feelings. Is that normal? Is individual therapy helpful or harmful?
You know what? I'm really actually glad you asked that question and someone asked that question. That is actually, you may be surprised to hear from me, a therapist of 36 years in different settings. Ther- Therapy isn't the end all be all for everything. Can it be helpful for many things? Yes. But here's how I'd like to look at it. There's different, therapists, we click or we don't click with them, but there's different types of therapy. There's talk therapy, and sometimes it really helps to just vent feelings and have your feelings really listened to, feel understood and validated. That's helpful. But for some people, they need more than that from therapy. They need to learn some strategies and skills for overcoming some of the thoughts and feelings they have. It's not wrong to have them, but hey, I want to be able to move past this. And therapy can actually, and that actually, I was going to do this at the end, but that actually helps you work through things and move forward. Let's say if we have trauma and we haven't been able to overcome trauma, it's impacting our current life. Specific type of therapy can be helpful. Evidence-based trauma therapy like EMDR or accelerated resolution therapy can help. So it depends on, I guess the short answer, well, the long answer is it depends on the type of therapy and whether you connect with your therapist. Like, what would your goal be for therapy? If you could think about that, I just want to talk about it and be heard and understood. I want a way to work through this and overcome this. Or despite coping skills, I still am affected by the past. Do you see what I'm saying? It depends on the kind of therapy, which leads me to, in just a minute, we're going to talk about the CBT in the bottom of the screen here, you can see. So I'm going to pause that for a minute just to say, talk about grieving. If we are grieving a loss of any kind, family, friend, um, a job, losing our health. I mean, if we're going through grieving, that can often lead to feeling lonely because we feel kind of alone in our situation. Obviously, we're not going to just get over that just like that. And nobody should tell us we should. Grieving is a process. Therapy can sometimes help with that. But if you need other support, I really recommend Caring Connections. They're out of the University of Utah School of Nursing, and the group that runs Caring Connections is they're experts in that. They even have like a get together online. They have online groups and in-office groups, different kind of specific support groups. Loss of a spouse, loss of a friend, loss of family member, loss to suicide. And then they have people you can connect with individually. They have webinars, they have events. So that's one thing I wanted to share about grief before I get back to answering some of the mental health questions. So skipping ahead to cognitive behavioral therapy. Oh, here at Blomquist Hill Solutions, we use a solution-focused approach. No, it's not long-term therapy. It's not weekly, but we can help with about 80 to 85% of what people bring to us. Anxiety, depression. Let's say I'm just feeling lonely all the time. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a method that we use that can be really, really helpful. So obviously I'm going to get back to the screen I'm looking for. Bear with me a second. Okay. Okay, here we go. Thank you for bearing with me. It is our situation can cause loneliness, right? But also how we think or believe about our situation absolutely affects how we feel. There's 70 years of evidence of this. I've used these skills myself for me and also in my 36 years of mental health therapy. It's a very well evidence-based therapy for type of therapy for helping to reduce your loneliness when it comes to how we're thinking and believing. So if we feel isolated, we feel like we're not anybody else, we feel no one loves it. For example, if we have thoughts that really don't help us, like I'm boring, no one likes me, no one wants to be with me, or we have social anxiety, I just can't get out, I can't do these things. CBT can really help you identify the thoughts and beliefs that cause you to feel anxious, depressed, lonely. It's a very effective tool. Okay. One other one that's an effective tool is distress tolerance skills. Just like it sounds, how to tolerate distress and how to alleviate it. There is one method, they have many methods of feeling better, but one of them is radical acceptance. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail, but I just want you to know it doesn't mean, oh, I should just be okay with my situation. No, it is that radical acceptance is a process where we identify, I'm lonely, I don't like it. I don't agree with the situation. I don't want this. And it is what it is, or it is, what can I change about it? So radical acceptance helps us accept things, not agree with them or think they're right. Let's say our loneliness is caused by a family member cutting us off, and we've done everything we can to repair it. And so we're lonely because of that. Of course, we're going to grieve and feel bad about that. But we don't want to feel miserable all the time. So we say, have I done everything I could? Have I tried to change whatever I can? But they're just not accepting it. I'm still going to be sad about that. But do I want to feel miserable all the time? No.
It's not.
You know, right? Any other thoughts, questions about that? Yeah, but like we might have been situations like that where I've done everything I can and I just have to wait and it's really hard. I don't know if they'll ever reach out again. And I've done what I can and that feels lonely. But I also don't want to be miserable all the time. So it's coming to an acceptance of they've done this thing, they've cut me out. I feel bad about it. I don't like it. They don't understand the truth and I feel bad but I can't change what they're doing. It is what it is. And until or unless they change that, I am going to live my life. Of course, I'm going to be affected by it, but I'm not going to stay in misery. I'm going to have some sadness, but I'm also going to move forward and do things that are in my power and in my control. So what it does is tries to help us have as much peace of mind as we can, given situations that are out of our control.
I had that situation, and what I decided to do was, since the other people did not want me to be part of their lives, um, I feel really bad about it, but
Yeah.
I just decided, okay, well, if they don't want me to be part of their life and not going to let me spoil them or, be around them, then I will find other people to fill that void or
Yeah.
be able to spoil.
I love that. Thank you so much, Michelle. I love that. It's a process because, of course, we're still going to grieve a situation, right? But do they, do we have to give them the power to make us miserable forever? No. We'll have times of sadness, but we're going to move forward. We're going to connect with other people. So part of our loneliness is situations, health, whatever reason, things that are out of our control. I guess as a wrap up, I want to say that part of it is also things we can do, even little steps that we can do, and you can test them or think back to things you've already tried before. And say you're helping someone who often feels lonely and you don't know how to help them, right? So, so some of these ideas, see what they've tried before, see what you've tried before, see some of these things, test them out. It's my encouragement to see what works for you, because there's a lot of evidence that over time with practice, these things do work. Let's say it's still heavy, or you do want some support, or let's say you don't want to quote unquote one, but you do want someone that will actually listen. Feel free to contact us. You're welcome to call us at any time, 801-262-9619. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, we have a few actually. So someone said, is it normal to still be grieving after 2 years of losing a spouse? I most recently started talking to someone and getting back in the dating scene, and this individual feels that I don't care about them because I'm still grieving a spouse. They feel that I'm still in love with my deceased spouse. I feel he is wrong as I can't control my feelings. Do I need to give myself more time alone since I'm still grieving?
Oh, that's a wonderful question, and I'm definitely sorry that you're experiencing that. It's hard because what's normal and what's not normal for grieving, right? But I will say that some parameters are if after some year, the year or two, you feel like it's impacting your life more than you want it to, or you've heard comments like that. Now, I'm not saying people who don't understand, oh, you shouldn't grieve at all. I'm not talking about that, but it's been a couple years and you still find some things that keep you stuck. You aren't moving through the process. I mean, it's always going to be a hole missing your spouse. There's always going to be a piece missing, and certain times of the year or certain gestures are going to affect us. That's normal. But if we find we're in a state of grief for a long, long, long period of time, there may be some things that are keeping us stuck, things we believe or feel about it that we need to explore so we can move through them. For example, we could be thinking, well, it was my fault this, or I should have that, or I'm not allowed to love someone. Does that make sense? You can explore that in either a grief support group or in therapy that can help you work through those things that are keeping you stuck in the process. So, so in some ways it's definitely normal. In other ways, if we're feeling like we're not able to move forward, it is okay to seek some support for that, to move through the process.
Well, I also think if kind of as you said, being stuck, if you're constantly talking about that person, if you're constantly thinking about that person, then you're
Mhm.
probably not ready to get serious with someone else. You need to be able
Yeah,
to get to the point where you can focus on that other person and not say don't love your spouse anymore, but
right, right.
that relationship was in the past. And if you want to form a new one, that new person needs to be felt loved and they need your attention, not keep talking about your deceased spouse.
Yes. Yes, thank you so much. Heather, you said there were other questions?
It was actually just comments back and forth with the person going through that. Just
Yeah, it's so hard, isn't
yeah,
it?
and like finding that balance. Um yeah,
Yeah,
is that normal? I don't know if normal is the word, but
yeah.
sh I mean, isn't she always going to talk about her spouse that she was
Yeah,
with?
and you should be able to different times. You should be able to talk about them. Oh, and sometimes we even laugh about it. We say, "Oh, remember when Bob this did this and that? Remember Bob used to do that?" Or certain times of the year and certain things that remind you of that. Sometimes we feel guilty about dating that. So again, working through whatever the stuck points are. But there is one more thing I think I would add to that. There is a condition called complicated grief or more protracted grief. There is where it goes from grief processes you go through like anger, depression, bargaining, all those things that you might go through, and it seems to last or be protracted, or it's not getting better. Like it's not like there's not the whole, but the whole amount of grief just does not seem to be getting better over time, and it's lasting a long time. Then that there is an actual condition where it changed to more prolonged grief or more complicated grief. And that's when I would say, I really think it would be important to talk to a therapist about that to work through that, like the things that are keeping us stuck. Does that kind of answer that? The difference between when's normal, not normal? Yeah.
I said yes, so thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everybody that's been a part of this because it's vulnerable to feel lonely. We will have times. But I guess what I'm saying, there's times when any of us will have a temporary feeling of loneliness. That is perfectly part of the human experience. Sometimes it's a little bit longer, but it doesn't and shouldn't be, need to be a permanent state of being. So my encouragement is to try some of these or all of these different things to see if it helps alleviate some of the loneliness over time. It should, because they're not just things we're throwing out. These are tested things that tend to work for people. However, if it is still not working, again, we encourage you to reach out and we'd be happy to help. And if it needs something even more specialized or more frequent or long term than we do, one of the things we really value is helping you get connected to something. If for the very small amount of things that are not in our scope of practice, we try to get you connected. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating. Feel free to reach out to us, ask questions or concerns. And my wish is for your having a little hope that it can be overcome, because for most situations, it can be overcome. Thank you.